What if the child you threw away became the doctor who saved your life? This is the story of Ada, a woman who abandoned her baby in the slums, only to discover years later that her son had grown up to become everything she never was. Sometimes the people we hurt the most are the ones who end up saving us. And sometimes the love we reject comes back to us in ways we never expected. This is a story about choices, consequences, and the strange way life has of bringing us full circle. It's about a mother who threw away her child and a son who grew up to be better than she ever was. Ada was 22 when she made the decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She was standing in the cramped bathroom of her small apartment, staring at the pregnancy test in her shaking hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. Again. This wasn't her first time seeing those lines. In fact, it was her 4th time in 3 years. But unlike the previous times, this pregnancy would be different. This time, she wouldn't have a choice. Ada had grown up in a strict religious household where her father preached fire and brimstone every Sunday, and her mother spent her days praying for the souls of sinners. But Ada, she had no interest in their God or their rules. While her parents expected her to marry young and start a family, Ada wanted freedom. She wanted to party, to drink, to sleep with whoever she wanted without consequences. The first 3 pregnancies had been easy to handle. A quick visit to the clinic, a few $100s, and the problem was solved. No one needed to know. Her parents certainly didn't need to know. Ada would disappear for a weekend, telling them she was visiting friends, and return as if nothing had happened. But this 4th pregnancy was different. When she went to the clinic, the doctor took one look at her medical history and shook his head. 3 previous procedures had left scar tissue. Her uterus was damaged. Another abortion could kill her. "I'm sorry, Miss Ada," the doctor said, his voice gentle but firm. "I can't perform the procedure. It's too dangerous. You'll have to carry this baby to term." Ada stared at him in disbelief. "You don't understand. I can't have a baby. I'm not ready. I don't want this." "I'm sorry," he repeated, "but I won't risk your life." She left the clinic that day in a daze. For the first time in her life, Ada was truly trapped. She couldn't tell her parents. They would disown her for getting pregnant outside marriage, but they would also expect her to keep the baby and raise it properly. She couldn't tell her friends. Most of them were party girls like her who wouldn't understand. And she certainly couldn't tell a father, whoever he was. Ada had been with so many men in recent months that she honestly wasn't sure who had gotten her pregnant. The next 9 months were the longest of Ada's life. She hid her pregnancy as long as possible, wearing loose clothes and avoiding her family. When she finally started showing, she moved to a different part of town, telling everyone she was taking a job in another city. She found a small, dirty apartment in the slums where nobody asked questions, and nobody cared about a pregnant woman living alone. During those months, Ada felt nothing but resentment. She resented the baby growing inside her. She resented the changes happening to her body. She resented being forced into a situation she had never wanted. Every kick from the baby felt like a reminder of her trapped situation. Every morning sickness episode made her angry. She didn't read pregnancy books or prepare for motherhood. She just waited for it to be over. When the labor pains started, Ada was alone in her apartment. She had no money for a hospital, no one to call for help. She gave birth on her bathroom floor, screaming and cursing the baby that was causing her so much pain. When it was over, when the tiny, crying infant was placed in her arms, Ada felt nothing. No maternal instinct. No rush of love. Just emptiness and the desperate desire to make this all go away. The baby was a boy. Small, wrinkled, and helpless. He had her nose, and what looked like it might be his father's eyes, though Ada couldn't be sure. As she held him, still covered in blood and exhaustion, only one thought filled her mind. How could she get rid of him? For 3 days, Ada kept the baby in her apartment. She fed him because he wouldn't stop crying otherwise. She changed his diapers because the smell was unbearable. But she felt no connection to him. If anything, she felt more trapped than ever. This tiny person was completely dependent on her, and she had nothing to give him. On the 4th day, Ada made her decision. She wrapped the baby in the cleanest towel she could find and put him in a small cardboard box. She walked through the slums until she found what she was looking for, a garbage dump where people sometimes left things they didn't want. It was early morning, and the streets were mostly empty. Ada placed the box carefully next to a pile of trash. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his mother was about to abandon him forever. She stood there for a moment, looking down at the box. Part of her, a very small part, wondered if she should take him back. But the larger part of her just felt relief. Finally, she would be free. She walked away without looking back. As she reached the corner, she heard the baby start to cry, but she didn't turn around. She just kept walking, faster and faster, until she couldn't hear him anymore. But the baby didn't die that day. 20 minutes after Ada walked away, a man named Namdi was making his way through the slums, collecting bottles and cans to sell for recycling. He was a quiet man in his 40s who had never married, spending his days doing odd jobs to survive. As he approached the garbage dump, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks, the sound of a baby crying. Namdi looked around, confused. There weren't many families with babies in this part of the slums, and the crying sounded like it was coming from the dump itself. He followed the sound and found the cardboard box. When he opened it and saw the tiny infant inside, his heart nearly broke. The baby was red-faced from crying, his little fists waving in the air. He was so small, so helpless, and someone had just thrown him away like garbage. Namdi had seen many terrible things in his life, but this was different. This was a child who had done nothing wrong, abandoned by the person who should have loved him most. Without hesitation, Namdi picked up the box and carried it home. He lived in a small shack with his girlfriend, Ninkechi, a woman who worked as a cleaner in the nearby market. When Namdi walked through the door carrying the box, Ninkechi immediately knew something was wrong. "What is that?" she asked, though she could already hear the crying. "Someone left a baby at the dump," Namdi said quietly. "We can't just leave him there." Ninkechi looked into the box and her expression softened instantly. She had always wanted children but had never been able to have them. The doctors had told her years ago that she was infertile, and she had accepted that she would never be a mother. But now, here was a baby who needed parents, and she was a woman who desperately wanted to be a mother. "He's so small," she whispered, gently lifting the baby from the box. How could someone do this to their own child? They didn't have much. Their shack had only 2 rooms, and they barely made enough money to feed themselves. But they had something more important than money. They had love to give. That first night, Ninkechi stayed up all night with the baby, feeding him with milk they bought from a neighbor who had a cow. She sang to him softly, rocking him back and forth, promising him that he would never be abandoned again. They named him Emma, which means whole in their language. It seemed fitting. This baby would make their small family complete. The early years were not easy. Namdi and Ninkechi had to work extra jobs to afford diapers, formula, and clothes for Emma. They couldn't afford a crib, so he slept in a basket between them. When he got sick, they couldn't afford doctors, so Ninkechi would stay up all night nursing him back to health with home remedies and pure determination. But Emma was loved. Oh, how he was loved. Every morning, Ninkechi would wake up before dawn to prepare his breakfast before going to work. Every evening, Namdi would come home exhausted from his labor jobs, but he always had energy to play with Emma, to teach him new words, to tell him stories. They may not have had money, but they gave Emma something far more valuable. They gave him security, attention, and unconditional love. As Emma grew older, it became clear that he was special. Not just because Namdi and Ninkechi thought he was special. All parents think their children are special. But Emma really was different. He started talking earlier than other children. He learned to read before he even started school. He was curious about everything, asking questions that surprised adults with their intelligence. The other children in the slums often made fun of Emma. They called him names because he didn't know who his real parents were. They said he was probably the son of a prostitute or a criminal. Some of the adults in the neighborhood whispered that there must be something wrong with a child whose own mother didn't want him. But Namdi and Ninkechi never let these comments reach Emma's ears. They taught him that family isn't about blood. It's about love, commitment, and choice. "Your mother gave birth to you," Ninkechi would tell him when he was old enough to understand. "But we chose you. We chose to love you. We chose to raise you. We chose to be your family. And that choice means more than anything else." Emma excelled in school despite the challenges. The school in the slums was underfunded and overcrowded, but Emma's teachers quickly recognized his potential. He was always at the top of his class, always eager to learn more. When he was 12, one of his teachers approached Namdi and Ninkechi with an opportunity. "There's a scholarship program for gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds," she explained. Emma could get a full scholarship to one of the best schools in the city. It would mean a better education, better opportunities for his future. Namdi and Ninkechi looked at each other. They knew this was Emma's chance for a better life, but it would also mean he would have to leave them. The school was far from the slums, and Emma would have to live in a dormitory during the week. "What do you think, Emma?" Ninkechi asked. "Do you want to try for the scholarship?" Emma, who was 13 now and already taller than Ninkechi, looked at his adoptive parents with tears in his eyes. "I don't want to leave you," he said. "You're my family. And we always will be," Namdi said firmly. "But this is your chance to build a future for yourself. We've given you all the love we can, but we can't give you the education you deserve. Take this chance, son. Make us proud." Emma took the scholarship. It was hard being away from Namdi and Ninkechi during the week, but he threw himself into his studies with determination. He wanted to make them proud. He wanted to prove that their love and sacrifice hadn't been wasted. Every weekend, he would return to the slums, sharing what he had learned with the two people who had saved his life. The years passed, and Emma continued to excel. He graduated top of his class and earned another scholarship to university. He had decided he wanted to become a doctor. When people asked him why, he would say it was because he wanted to help people the way Namdi and Ninkechi had helped him. Meanwhile, Ada was living a very different life. After abandoning her baby, Ada felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in months, she could go wherever she wanted, do whatever she pleased. She moved back to the nicer part of town, telling people she had been away on a long work assignment. Nobody questioned her story, and Ada quickly fell back into her old patterns of partying and living carelessly. But something had changed inside her. Maybe it was the trauma of giving birth alone, or maybe it was the guilt she tried so hard to ignore, but Ada found herself drinking more than before. She would go to bars and clubs, looking for men who could buy her drinks and take her mind off the thoughts that crept into her head late at night. She tried not to think about the baby. She had convinced herself that someone would have found him and taken him to an orphanage, where he would be adopted by a nice family who actually wanted children. It was during one of these nights out that Ada met Senator Adebayo. He was a powerful man in his 50s, recently divorced, with connections throughout the government. Ada was 23 then, young and beautiful, and the senator was immediately attracted to her. She was everything his ex-wife wasn't: spontaneous, fun-loving, and completely uninterested in his political career. Their relationship started casually. The senator would call Ada when he was in town, take her to expensive restaurants, buy her gifts. Ada enjoyed the attention and the luxury, but she made it clear that she wasn't looking for anything serious. She had no interest in becoming a politician's wife, with all the responsibilities and expectations that came with it. But the senator was persistent. He showered Ada with expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and took her on vacations to places she had only dreamed of visiting. He bought her a beautiful apartment in the most exclusive part of the city, complete with a full-time maid and a driver. For the first time in her life, Ada didn't have to worry about money. The arrangement worked well for both of them. The senator got a beautiful young companion who didn't ask questions about his work or demand too much of his time. Ada got financial security and access to a lifestyle she had never imagined possible. She became known in social circles as the senator's girlfriend, attending parties and events where she was treated with respect simply because of who she was with. But there was always something missing. The senator was kind to her, generous with his money, but he never truly loved her. She was an accessory to him, a beautiful woman who made him look good at public events. When they were alone together, their conversations were shallow. He would talk about his political ambitions, and she would nod and smile, but neither of them was really interested in the other person's thoughts or feelings. Ada tried to convince herself that this was enough. She had a beautiful home, expensive clothes, and never had to worry about paying bills. She could spend her days shopping, getting her hair and nails done, and meeting friends for lunch. It was the kind of life many women would envy. But as the months turned into years, Ada started to feel empty inside. She had everything she thought she wanted, but she wasn't happy. She spent her days in luxury, but her nights were often lonely. The senator was frequently away on business or attending political functions where she wasn't invited. She would lie in her expensive bed, in her beautiful apartment, and feel completely alone. It was during this time that Ada started thinking about having another child. She was now 26, and something inside her had started to change. Maybe it was seeing other couples with their children, or maybe it was the way the senator's eyes lit up when he talked about his own grown children from his previous marriage. Ada began to think that a baby might fill the emptiness she felt inside. She brought up the subject with the senator one evening over dinner. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Maybe we should have a child together." The senator looked surprised. "A child? Ada, you've never shown any interest in children before." "I know," she said, "but I'm older now, more mature. I think I'm ready to be a mother." The senator was quiet for a long moment. "Ada, you know I already have children. I'm not looking to start another family at my age." "But this would be different," Ada pressed. "This would be our child. Together." The senator reached across the table and took her hand. "Sweetheart, you're young and beautiful. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why would you want to tie yourself down with a baby right now?" Ada pulled her hand away. "Maybe because I want something real in my life. Something that matters." But the senator had made up his mind. "I'm not ready for that kind of commitment, Ada. I thought you understood that about our relationship." That conversation marked the beginning of the end for Ada, though she didn't realize it at the time. She became obsessed with the idea of having a child, convinced that a baby would solve all her problems and fill the emptiness in her life. She started reading pregnancy books, looking at baby clothes in stores, and imagining what it would be like to be a mother. Without telling the senator, Ada stopped taking birth control. She was certain that if she got pregnant, he would come around. He would realize that he wanted to be a father again, and they would get married and live happily ever after. But months passed, and nothing happened. Ada wasn't getting pregnant. At first, she thought it was just bad timing, but as more time went by, she started to worry. She went to see a doctor, hoping for reassurance that everything was fine. The news was devastating. The 3 abortions she had in her early 20s, combined with the traumatic birth of the baby she had abandoned, had caused severe damage to her reproductive system. Scar tissue had formed, blocking her fallopian tubes. The doctor explained that she would likely never be able to conceive naturally, and even with medical intervention, her chances of getting pregnant were very low. Ada left the doctor's office in a daze. She sat in her expensive car in the parking lot and cried until she couldn't cry anymore. For the first time, she truly understood what she had lost when she walked away from her baby all those years ago. She had thrown away her only chance at motherhood, and now it was too late. She never told the senator about her infertility. Instead, she became increasingly desperate and clingy, constantly bringing up the subject of marriage and children. The senator, who had always appreciated Ada's independence, began to find her neediness annoying. Their relationship, which had been based on convenience and superficial attraction, started to crumble under the weight of Ada's desperation. The final blow came when Ada was 29. She was driving home from another failed doctor's appointment, this time a fertility specialist who had confirmed what she already knew, when she ran a red light and crashed into another car. The accident left her with severe injuries to her spine. After months of surgeries and physical therapy, the doctors delivered more devastating news. She would never walk again. Ada was now confined to a wheelchair, dependent on others for basic tasks she had once taken for granted. The senator, who had stayed by her side during the initial recovery, gradually began to distance himself. He still paid for her medical care and made sure she had everything she needed, but his visits became less frequent, and when he did come, he seemed uncomfortable and eager to leave. The senator's abandonment came slowly, then all at once. At first, he would make excuses. He was busy with important legislation. He had to travel for work. He needed to focus on his upcoming election campaign. But Ada could see the truth in his